Great.
All right, good evening, everyone. It is 6 o'clock on Wednesday, June 18th. We'll officially call this meeting to order. I do not have an agenda in front of me, but I just want to confirm, so we'll, I guess, do a roll call, all the same procedural things. We have an agenda and all this stuff.
Yes,
Okay,
we
great.
just, it's gonna be, do the roll call.
Perfect. Okay, so roll call, Carly Hoover, Director, District 1.
Charlie Simpson, Director, District 3.
Dave Larson, Director, District 5.
Dr. Consigliere, superintendent. And I think I have Kate on, I'm promoting Kate on too.
And then we do need to approve the agenda.
Yep, perfect. Welcome to all of our guests joining us, obviously virtually, because we're all virtual this evening. So if I could get a motion to approve today's agenda.
So moved.
Second.
All right, all in favor of approval?
Aye.
Aye.
Wonderful. So we are here. Hey, Kate, welcome. We are here to for our first in a while, definitely since I've been on the board, town hall. That's really just intended to be kind of an open forum discussion. While there's not a particular topic, from my understanding, that we're addressing, we really just wanted to take this opportunity to have some open dialogue, hear from folks, and then be able to just have kind of again a more conversation oriented space. Director Simpson, Larson, or Kruller, any thoughts or anything you might want to add to kind of preface our time?
I think we just want to make sure that everyone knows we're about an hour. We want to give everybody an opportunity to talk. I think as people come in, if we're under like 10 people or so, then we can kind of just do a free talk of asking questions and whatnot. But if we're getting more people to join us, then we're probably going to need to change that to maybe raising the hand to make sure everybody gets an opportunity to be heard. So I think that's kind of really, I think unless someone else is thinking anything else.
Sounds good. This is Kate, and I want to let you know clearly I'm in the middle of a commute, and so I pulled over for this, and I'm going to be listening. If somebody asks me a question, I will pull over and answer, so it might take me a second.
Be safe. Yeah. And I'm going to put myself on mute and I will help manage. Right now we have under 10 people. But once we move them, we could actually have them raise their hands or we can pull them in. But I can move them over to panelists to be part of the larger group. If there's any more people after that, then we'll have to pause and then we'll have to go to hand raising just so people know. So I'll go ahead and
just make them allowed to talk.
Okay, great.
I'll help you.
Okay, great. So we'll if anyone has to raise their hand, and I know part of the conversation was around really discussing progress, where we are, and any reflections and hopes for the future. I know that was a topic. So anyone that wants to raise their hand and ask a question of the board, I will be here to help manage that along with Deb Core. But I'll turn myself off mute right now, and then I'll help manage all the questions. So you can ask any board members you'd like.
Hello.
Hey, this is Brandon.
Hi. Yeah, I was just wondering, I haven't really had a way of kind of figuring out what the staffing impacts are going to be for next year, how that's kind of shaked out. And I was just curious. I know that the HR staffing report was from the last meeting, but I'm just curious what that's looking like for next year. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for the question. And I definitely am happy to let Dr. Pedroza answer that question. I also just kind of wanted to check in, you know, and really think about, there's of course a lot of questions like that that really are more for our superintendent. And we can certainly, if there's space and time and Dr. Pedroza feels prepared to do so, can speak to some of those. And, you know, I would also want to think about like ways in which, you know, we can have a conversation about things that the board kind of has more ownership and responsibility for, if that makes sense. So all that to say, Dr. Pedroza, if you feel
Oh, yeah.
comfortable
Yeah.
kind of speaking to a little bit of that.
Yeah, I will just share that this year we had a larger number of retirements than we had in the previous year. We also had some resignations. We had people moving. There was a lot of shifts, right, in the environment. But we also had some people moving to other districts as well. So that actually, when those things happen, that actually helps us retain more of our current staffing, which I think actually helped minimize the big impact on staffing. There were some notices, as you saw from the HR report. There are some, we did do some reduction in force with some of our newest staff members, but closely monitoring our enrollment numbers, the majority of our staff, it was a very minimal impact. So to give people a sense about how that looked like, for example, all certificated staff have rights to appeal, right? And so when we do these notices last year, I had about 25 appeal meetings, where this year I had 1. So just to share, like in terms of the shift from last year to this year, so a much more minimal impact on staffing and hopefully maintaining the majority of staffing that we have. We also are in the position of hiring. So I know one of our schools just hired, I just checked in with Mr. Brett Christopher. He's already hired 6 staff members. So we're also hiring and recalling as well. So trying to look at those unique positions. The most challenging positions for us always are in hiring, are always the special education positions. Those are challenging positions to hire for: math, science in the high school. Those are the ones we do a lot of recruitment for, to make sure that we have adequate staffing, because they're just hard to fill. And so we're monitoring that closely. We're changing things too a little bit differently in terms of enrollment monitoring, because so last year we want to make sure that we are on top of it more. So we're actually keeping our office hours open Monday through Thursday in July, and we're having somebody collect all enrollment paperwork. So if you know of somebody who wants to come and enroll, we will be open in the summer in the district office, and we will be collecting enrollment paperwork over the summer. So those are little shifts that we're making, but very much a lesser impact this year than we had on the previous year. I don't know if that answered your question or not.
Yeah, that did. Thank you.
I think one thing I'll just, oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was just curious if, so Courtney Martinez, I'm a parent of a child at Foster High School. I was wondering if there's an update about the work that's going on between the Tukwila Pool and Foster High School. I know, like, my daughter's loves the swim. She was on the swim team, and so that's one of the things that I know I'm trying to keep track of to make sure that that stays in our community. So is there an update on that, on their whatever agreement y'all were making?
Yeah, I can speak to that a little bit, and then please, anyone else, the directors or Dr. Pedrosa chime in. Right now, what has been happening is that there have been some drafts of the agreement, going back and forth between the pool and the district to really kind of hone in on what that final agreement will be. The board still stands committed in our desire to want to partner with the pool to make sure that the pool has longevity, whether that's on our space or as we've talked about in previous sessions, whether that ultimately becomes the pool space or whether they end up in a different location in the city. We are really dedicated as a district to figuring out how we actually partner together in a mutually beneficial way. And so those are the things that are being fine-tuned right now. Our intention is to have I forget the actual name of the language of that agreement, ready to vote on at our upcoming board meeting at the end of June. Director Simpson, Larson, Kruller, or Dr. Pedrosa, any other additional things to add or some more context there?
No, I think you're correct in saying that we're committed to keeping the pool here. It was I was just talking with Dr. Pedrosa earlier before the meeting about that. I know that she wouldn't attended that meeting earlier, and so did Director Larson, and that they're just looking to see what it's going to be. I think it will be always in our community here. I know that we like having the pool in our area, and we're just making sure that the space that they're in is going to work for them. Basically. And so, and if it does, we're going to look at that, but no one's going to be going anywhere like very soon. I don't know. It's not like, they still have, I think I don't remember the years, but I want to say a few more years on currently. So it's nothing that's going to happen immediately.
And I'm just going to weigh in. When we first got the pool back, I was on the city council and I was a commissioner with the pool. And so I have a lot of friends there. And I think that the collaboration has been really, really good. And I'm hopeful that we can continue to find mutual agreement so that it works out really well for the school itself. And the pool can become a even better service to the public.
Yeah, and so there's kind of two issues going on with the pool. There's the short term and the long term. So we have an agreement in place. I forget what year we're in, 11 or 12 or something. And I think we're in the process of making some tweaks to that. But for the short term, but I'm sure we'll continue, as far as the swim teams, we'll continue to have swim teams there. And then the long term is, where's the pool obviously wants to do a large remodel or rebuild of their facility. And that's the one that's I was at a meeting this afternoon where they're getting community input, and that's a longer term decision, which the pool district is going to decide, do they want to, do this remodel on the same site, or do they want to do it at a different site or whatever. But that's obviously a longer term issue. It's going to take a few years to resolve. But anyway, so there's two things going on at the same time.
Thank you guys very much.
Hopefully that kind of addressed what you were hoping to hear. You're welcome to, Courtney, ask a follow-up question or inquire about something specific if you'd like. I think one of the things too that we've been spent some time talking about is really the impact that even a construction project would have on the school, right? And parking is a big consideration, right, for both parties. And so that is not, I wouldn't say necessarily a sticking point, but it's a point that we really have to make sure that we're thinking really thoughtfully about to ensure that, again, in the midst of a major construction project, that there's minimal disruption to our sports, to our school district access, or school building access, all of those things. And then long-term, how we have an effective parking situation that meets the needs of both entities that are really busy, right, and community oriented and have a lot going on. And so those are just two of, I think, kind of the larger points that have been in a topic of discussion as we've been engaging in really figuring out what that looks like. And that speaks a little bit to what Director Larson was saying about kind of those short-term versus those long-term considerations. Something I wanted to just kind of share too about Brandon, kind of going back to your question, if there's you or anyone else that's joining us that has, some specific questions about, knowing, activities or positions that might be impacted by the budget right now, what the plan is, right? As we went into last year, kind of around this time, we had a lot of discussion about, yes, here's what's happening from a staffing and a position perspective, and here's how we're going to fill those gaps to ensure that the students have minimal, or that there's minimal impact to our scholars, and increased support for our staff. So anyway, so if there's a specific piece or element or component, activity, class, whatever that might be that you're curious about too, like how are we filling that gap, or how are we stepping in the midst of some of the continued shifts in our staffing, please feel free to ask those too. I think this is like the forum to do that.
Go ahead, Mr. Eastman. If your hand's still up, do you still have a follow-up question?
Yeah. Oh, okay. I guess I'm unmuted.
Yeah, I think we can hear you now. Yep.
Yeah, I was just curious about like what are like things like a program, or what is sort of the impact that you guys see that will come from next year's budget? What beyond staffing is it that we might be having to replace in other ways, or find different ways of doing? Is there anything that stands out as kind of like something like, oh, we need to figure out a way to get this thing back, or fill in that gap?
I'll go ahead and answer right away, and then I'll let the board also answer from their perspective. But I think what we're trying to do is maintain what we have, or enhance it. We're trying to also learn about the impacts. We did a session with a work session where we invited all the art teachers, music, art, drama, for example, and they shared some of the impacts, but they also shared what they could do. But since that time, we've learned about instruments, impacts, we've learned about programming. And so we actually are working with a grant, actually a large sizable grant actually, to help supplement some of those gaps in the short term, and then hopefully build back our budget and dedication to continue those enhancements for the long term. Some of the asks were pretty big, like they're like sizable, like equipment, instruments, things like that. So hopefully those will be long-lasting impacts for the system. But those are things, for example, that we're assessing what's happening. Another example is dual language. That the proposal for anything for MLL students or second language learners or anything like that from the federal level has been cut, is actually eliminated. That's the proposal from the federal government. I'm just giving an example. Our state funding is remaining the same. So, but what that means is we can't add programming. So for example, if there's a desire to add another dual language program, we could, but it has to be cost neutral to the district, right? So those are the things that we're thinking about. And so just sort of maintaining right now what we have until as much as we can, because we did the biggest, largest cuts we did last year, which had the significant impacts, and then slowly bring back those pieces that we can bring. I will say, and I'm going to say kudos to Chief Financial Officer Amy Fleming. We are building back our reserves and building back to a positive fund balance. we're inching our way through. And so I just want to say that's been a lot of work, not just from her, but from all of us, teachers, principals, educators, thinking of cost cutting measures. I just had a meeting with early learning folks when they talked about ways that they want to think about. So everyone's thinking about it. Everyone's putting effort. And but our goal this year is to analyze the impacts, bring back the priorities when we get in a healthier financial situation, but maintain what we have right now, and then work from there. So I don't know if that answers, but I'll let the board add anything to that they'd like to add.
So in addition to the arts, and this is not only instrumental music, but choir and also drama, all of those, we're looking for ways to strengthen those. Another big one that's going to be a challenge is the outdoor education program. So this is the program for the 5th graders, and going out to Islandwood for a week and with leaders from Foster High School students. So that program, the grant was cut for that at the state level. So that's going to be a challenge. And then another one, I mean, we never really have gotten, a lot of this is some of it's left over from COVID that destroyed a lot of these things, but you know, more field trips in general to figure out how to get those funded so the students can be out and seeing different things in the world. So there's a number of things that we're going to have to work, and it's probably going to be over a number of years to kind of restore a lot of those things back to full strength.
Yeah, the only thing I would add, I totally agree with our superintendent that we're focusing on maintaining the good quality that we have now. We're to need to build our budget back up. I know the board's taking steps in doing that, has been doing a hard job with our superintendent and with our CFO, and trying to make that so that we won't be in the situation again, and that these conversations will be around, you know, the great things and all the stuff that's going to be changing and happening. And exactly what Director Larson was saying is being able to backfill when, you know, the federal level funding or something's been cut, we'll have that actual budget in place to be able to backfill a lot of this. So the goal is to keep going towards the goal of getting to a healthy, and so that we're a healthy budget, and basically is where we're at, and having some backfill to be able to do it when something occurs.
And at the risk of repeating, stabilization is sort of the key word for us, as opposed to constantly losing. And we're still looking at, you know, federal funding that's being withdrawn, other resources. And I think we're doing a really good job of prioritizing and stabilizing. There have been cuts, and I think the next key word would be innovation, looking for other ways to get revenue streams to support what once were programs that are now clubs, where you've heard Director Larson talk about the arts. We have to find reliable ways to fund those programs or clubs in ways that we hadn't done in the past, but now may be forced into for lack of funding through the state or funding through the federal government, or other things that may have dried up on us. But there's a lot of ideas being floated, and I'm excited about the way we're trying to innovate and think harder about how we can provide the best we can for our students.
Another couple of areas that I know our students notice, because they mentioned that we need to work on, and that is class sizes. I mean, anytime you lay off staff, then particularly certificated staff, inevitably class sizes are going to go up, and that's not good for students. And so that's one we need to be working on. And another one is just support staff in general. So the social workers and counselors and all the paraeducators and all the folks that are in support roles, you know, obviously we had to, you know, cut down on that. So below the level at which I think we would agree is good for our students, but that's because of the funding system from the state, which is not progressive. It's not student need based. So anyway, those are another couple of areas that we'll need to be working on.
All right, I know that Courtney Martinez, you have your hand up again, is that correct? Great,
Yes.
go ahead.
So I know in previous boards, this goes back to the Brandon's question kind of about programming. Is there a priority list now of what programming would be brought back or new programs implemented, or what is there a plan around when new items or cut programs are brought back? That is there a process that will seek student and like community input for to make sure that because I know that I've heard in previous board meetings that there's a desire to increase CTE programming in college and the high school, and I know the arts. However, we've also lost like a lot of our language offerings. Like we only offer Spanish now at Foster High School, whereas years ago we offered other languages as well for the foreign language requirement, or there were alternatives for like sports for the PE requirement. So I'm just curious as to like, I hear that we're waiting for solvency first, and like before we can get to the bringing of the back or the adding of the new. I'm just hopeful that there's a plan then for that.
Yeah, I'll speak to that first and then open it up to everyone else. So from a board perspective, we have not had much conversation to develop a plan around that. We've, I think, more just talked about, of course, like stability, and as everyone just spoke to about the budget. And so I think, Courtney, thank you so much for bringing this up. I think this is something important that we should start to talk about, maybe even have a work session in the coming months, right? So that even though we won't be out of binding conditions likely for another year, I want us to be thinking ahead, right? Thinking 5 years down the road, what that looks like. My guess is, my hunch is that Dr. Pedrosa's been thinking about that and may have a list kind of in the back of her mind. But I think also to your point about how we go about making that decision, I think is really critical. We talk so much, right? And I think in some ways we do it better than others. In some decisions we do it better than others, but community input is critical for ensuring that we make the right decisions for our scholars that are here now and that will be here in the future. And so from a board perspective, all that to say, we need to have that conversation and really think about before even making that plan, or rather before even making, that list, it is what is our plan to gather the right input from the right people, so that we can then have a collective crafting of that plan. So Kate, I noticed you had unmuted.
Yeah, I'm also want to invite it tonight if people have ideas. That's why we're having this town hall. Also, you can write to the board with a list of ideas and priorities and reasons why you think they might matter. We want to get as much community input as possible as we start to rebuild. But again, just understand we've come down into a valley and we're just stabilizing right now. And we want to keep everybody's hopes high, but at the same time, we have to be reasonable and just know there's only so much we can do. And if you have advice on what you think should be first and or a list, we'd like to hear from you.
Yeah, I think in my mind, that kind of discussion is really good to have as we do budget planning. So these last couple of years, the budget has been just about kind of survival, keep things, get us out of binding conditions, so forth. But in the budget for the 26-27 school year, I think that's a really good time. And we talked a little bit about how to, in the budget planning process, which typically starts like in January, so that the 26-27 will start in January of next year. That's a really good time to start, generating these lists of, okay, now if we've got a more stable financial situation and we can start putting back, start maybe investing in some of these other programs that we've had to disinvest in, that would be a great time to start doing that. And hopefully we'll have I was looking at some of the things that they do in the Edmonds School District around budgeting and how they create lists that you can send to the community for here are different things that we are thinking about doing and please rate them and so forth. So hopefully we'll get a process like that going for the 26-27 and school year. And then of course, it's always good to be looking around for alternative funding sources. As we talked about the arts this year. If we can find funding sources outside of the state and federal government, then those things can kind of move to the top of the list because they come with a revenue stream that we can actually use quicker. So if there's any ideas for those kinds of things, yeah, that's always a good thing to hear.
And I was going to say exactly what you said, Director Larson, is that the budget advisory last year, there was a long list of priorities, but so much has changed in the last 3 years. So I think as we move beyond stabilization, moving towards visioning, and I think because I've heard loudly in many spaces, for example, the loss of social workers, right? That has been a critical piece, but also when you're thinking about all the things that we've lost, not just social workers and other programming, I think really prioritizing what are the things that are most impactful to our students, and everything post-COVID, as we've talked about, 5 years. It's the 5-year anniversary of all of that, but there's still long-lasting impacts. So we just need to make sure we're addressing all of that. But what is the vision? And hopefully, because we're doing the portrait of the graduate work, and we've got the Tukwila Promise, and all of these things, like sort of recasting, like what is the future of a scholar from Foster High School? That hopefully will drive our priorities, right? Because what we envision, how they enter into the world after graduation, we have to backwards map from there. So I think there's a lot of opportunity for us to revision what the future holds in terms of prioritization to bringing back programming.
Go ahead, Joe.
Sweet, thanks. Hey, Joe Camacho, teacher at Foster High School, Tukwila resident. Just had a quick question around recruitment for new board members. I know there was some intentional effort, either this last school year or the year before, to recruit more folks to apply to be on the school board. When we look, I think there's just a handful of people who have applied for positions that will be open for next year. When we contrast that, or when we compare that to what's happening with our
Joe, you cut out.
Uh-oh.
Sorry. So just for some reason you cut out right after you talked about recruitment. Can you repeat what you said? At least I didn't hear you.
Totally. I'll make it brief. There's a lot less people running for open city council, or sorry, school board seats than there are city council. And I know there was intentional effort to try to increase the amount of applicants, specifically diverse applicants for the school board positions. I'm wondering, what are some lessons learned? Like what worked, what didn't, and what's the strategy moving forward to try to get more folks to take on responsibility with the board?
Well, I'm going to jump out and say I worked really hard to work through our PTO, to work through my neighborhood in District 2, to reach out to organizations of various cultures in our diverse community. And I will say two things are at the fore for problematic. One, I didn't take any pay for the position while I was here, but the amount that is allocated through the state doesn't seem to be substantial enough to attract people. And two, I really think the board needs to consider what time they meet and whether or not that's something that people in the community can find time to do, because we have meetings that start at 3 in the afternoon, which is very helpful to staff, etc. People have jobs till 5. That's, you know, they think that self-eliminates them. And then maybe others don't want to meet late at night. I don't know. It's a tough formula to fit, because you're also asking staff to stay late on the meetings that start at 6 o'clock. In the end, a lot of people have opinions on how the board should vote and think and what direction they should go. But people in general in the public have a lot going on in their lives, sometimes with 2 jobs. It seem to be obviously people with families and kids in the school system, and all of those activities that go with their children tend to turn into a thing where it might be overextend for them. That doesn't mean we shouldn't keep trying to recruit. It doesn't mean we should keep rethinking, you know, is our approach to meetings systemic in a way that presents a barrier to other people.
Yeah, I think I'll echo some of that. You know, I think, so we shifted our meeting structure last year a little bit, one to, in some ways, reduce how often we were meeting. I think there's definitely a lot of lessons learned about the adverse impacts that had on essentially, like, it created longer meetings for our regular board meetings. And so I think, you know, decisions or, you know, experiments rather with things like that always are going to be learning opportunities, right? So I do think that there's some opportunity for the board to really think about, you know, should we, as we're thinking about what the board calendar looks like for next year, you know, do we want to shift kind of just some of that board business? I do think that, you know, that the balance, as Kate mentioned, like finding that right cadence, that right formula is really difficult, right? Because we're like, everybody has so many different work situations, life situations, just all of these different things, right? And so finding a time, you know, to meet that makes sense for, you know, I think it's just an interesting puzzle piece, right? So then I think the best that we can continue to do is just reflect on that and make changes as we can as we're adapting the following year schedule. I think too, you know, I'm just going to be really honest, and Kate spoke to it a little bit, like there's not a whole lot of incentive financially to invest the amount of time that some of us do, right, in the board, that most of us do on the board, and there's not a whole lot of, like, I'm just being real honest now, Joe, because that's how I am, and that's how I need to show up. I feel like, you know, it is not a very it's a hard position to be in, and for a lot of reasons, and I think it is also in some ways, like, I just think, quite frankly, not always on the same, perceived as being on the same level as some of the other elected positions, right? And so folks that are interested in running for positions are going to often veer towards, I think, that city council, right? And the only reason I name that is because you brought that up, is kind of like we're seeing a lot more folks running for those city council positions. It's just, and so I think, you know, I also want to acknowledge, without just like totally passing the buck, is this idea that, you know, civic engagement is a community, like, we have to figure out how to increase civic engagement and civic interest and elected, you know, running in our community, right, collectively. And while we certainly have tried to do some intentional things to increase recruitment, it also really isn't the board's responsibility on our own to get folks involved and invested in the work of the district. And so I think, yeah, now I think I'm just rambling a little bit at this point. But I think, you know, the more, if you have ideas, right, as a resident, what would that look like? How do we work more collaboratively across our Tukwila community to say, hey, here's why we need people on the school board, right? Here's what the school board does. Here's how you have the opportunity to make a difference. But even still, I think it's been really, 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 really hard to get folks to say yes. I am so happy, though, that we will not have a vacant position come November. That's really exciting. We have someone in each position on the ballot. So we are not in the same position that we found ourselves in after the previous election, which I feel is a success. In our, like, that speaks to some of those efforts that we did. And we have a full board now, which also spoke to you, right? We had 2 folks that were appointed. So I think the successes, right? If you ask, as you asked, like, those are the fact, those are 2 evidences to me about some of those successes. And was it perfect? No. Can we still contribute or figure out ways to do better? Yes. And I really want to challenge us as a community to figure out how we just increase social and political and civic engagement as a whole.
So a couple thoughts on this. So you compared it to the city council. So the city council actually gets a salary. I forget what it is. Kate, you may know, 14,000, 15,000, something like that. School district doesn't get a salary. This has been a discussion at the state level for quite a number of years, and there have been bills at various times to actually, provide a salary position as a school board director. They've not passed at all yet, but it's an active discussion that goes on at the state level. So it's particularly relevant if you're talking about from low income communities where it's a big deal. I mean, if you can't really afford to be doing a lot of extra free time. The other thing that we talked about, and I guess I would first of all echo Director Hoover's kind of success stories, that because we did a lot of awareness campaigning and so forth, and actually do have positions on the ballot for all the positions. The other thing that we did talk about at one time, because sometimes we have people that apply to be on the school board, but they don't live in the right district. So another option that we do have that we could go to is, right now we have all districted positions, which is also a differential from the city council, which everybody's at large. So we've always, as a school district, kind of hesitated to go totally at large because you risk having like all the people come from one part of the city or around one particular school or something like that, and you wouldn't get the representation. On the other hand, we do have an option to go something in the middle. We could do, like 3 or 4 districts and then 1 or 2 at large. And that's another option, we talked about. We haven't done it. It would require a vote of the people, and votes are expensive because we'd have to pay for it. And they're, $30,000, $40,000, whatever it is, to do a ballot initiative. So in these times of tight money, we've been a little bit reluctant to do that. But anyway, there's several, there are a number of options, and we can continue to look at those.
I'll just add in terms of the one thing to think about, Joe, is I know One America has also been really looking at this as well as a topic. They've been doing some outreach and some legislative action around that. So maybe that's something that members of our community could explore, and maybe we can partner with them because they've been doing some advocacy work around that and looking at the requirements, looking at pay, looking at all of those things that you talk about to really make sure that we're really leveraging all of our community members.
Something else that just came to mind too is like, there's got to be a national, like, feeling around national school board members that are like that have an impact, right? Like, school board members across the country are like, again, in certain places, it's really hard to be a school board member, right? Because you're getting a lot of heat for a lot of different things from a lot of different people. I mean, obviously that's what being an elected person is, right? But I wonder if some of those, stories that you hear and you see about the school board meetings, just kind of getting out of control, I wonder if that is impacting the narrative and folks' belief about what it means to be a school board member, particularly here in Tukwila, where like we are so fortunate that we don't have that, right? Obviously, we have heated discussions sometimes, and big feelings that can come up at our board meetings, but we don't have that. We're not seeing that like we are across the country. And so I was just thinking, just as Dr. was talking, that I wonder if some of that might be influencing folks like comfort level with even putting themselves in any sort of position or limelight or drawing attention, so just something that is coming up, like just nationally. It feels really hard to want to step into really any sort of elected position.
Yeah, kind of piggybacking on this. I'm wondering if, because I think, and I could be wrong, that there's like like you got to be like a U.S. citizen requirement in order to be put on a ballot to be run for school board. And if I'm wrong, then that's awesome. But if I'm not wrong, then I wonder what out of the box ways we could add more representation on, like, because I think of our students, and this may not be possible, but like our student representatives, how we used to only have junior and senior, and now we have sophomore. And so I wonder if there is a way to add that, because like given the dynamic of the diversity of our of the city that we're in, not all of them, not everybody that may want to come and be involved civically can be involved civically. And I know like that speaks to the bigger push for legislation. I know California has done a lot of great work around undocumented persons being able to vote in city elections, so things that impact like with taxes, but they can't vote on a federal level. So that took a long time though. So I'm wondering if there's something that could be done within the board to add almost like cabinet members that could be contributors.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Director Larson.
Yeah, I was just going to say, so for a number of years, there has been a bill to allow, you're correct, to be on the board, you have to be a U.S. citizen. There's been a bill to change that for school board elections to, permanent resident of some sort. And it's been, I've worked with One America on that particular issue. That bill has come up a couple times. It has not made it through because particularly in these times, that's a tough bill to get through because people will say, oh, that's a slippery slope, blah, 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 blah. So but that's an ongoing issue, but we don't, the school boards, we don't have the authority to make that move ourselves. That would be, my understanding, that would be required state to change state law, and we've been supporting that move, and I'll continue to do it, but it's just been a tough one to get through Olympia.
And I think on that note, I do wonder, again, thinking about that innovation and that kind of reimagining things. There are obviously limitations based on law, right, of what it means to be a voting member of the school board. But I wonder if there is possibility or flexibility to look like, as you just said, like either as a cabinet member or like an advisory vote, like our student representatives are. So what would it look like to engage more people in the discussion at the board table with a clear delineation, which is really stupid that we even have to do that, but a clear delineation about what their role in the voting process is, which again would be an advisory vote, but they wouldn't actually be voting members of the board. So all that to say, I think it's something that we could maybe explore. I have no idea what the legal things are around that, and if there would be anything that would prevent us from doing so, but I think it's certainly worth looking into.
Yeah, advisory votes certainly is something that we can do, and many districts have student advisory votes. That's a pretty common practice, and the procedure is basically when you come up for a vote, before you actually take the vote, you call on the whoever, in this case, it's mostly students, to give their opinion on an advisory vote, and then you go to the voting of the members. So that's a pretty, I wouldn't say common, but it's used quite a bit in the student-led student board representative groups in the state. That's one of the things on their list to get done in more school boards.
Really great questions.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, I did have a question though for everybody that's on here. Here is number one is, what brought you to this meeting, and why don't you think there are more people here? I mean, we're kind of at a free forum, being able to talk, kind of, exactly, these questions and stuff. And I'm wondering, as you in the community that's here, how did you hear about it? What made you want to be here? And then why do you think that there's not more people on here that, are accessing this? That would also be kind of helpful for us moving forward.
Go ahead, Stephanie.
Hi, so just coming from the district, I'm a fifth grade teacher, alumni of the school district, resident, and family member of current students. I think that for a lot of people, it's equity of access. So we talk about time of day, but also translation access. So I know our family liaisons have a lot of work to do, but a lot of our families, if they aren't going to be able to understand what's going on in the board meeting, I'm sure it kind of feels like a waste of time. So just sometimes I think when people aren't able to engage, the instinct might to assume that people are not interested or that they don't care. But there's also just like many other burdens that our families are going through, especially with the state of the world and all the trauma and fear going on right now. And in any way exposing themselves like publicly is really scary right now for a lot of people. So a lot of our families also work multiple jobs. And so if they work 2, 3 jobs or a single parent or just have a lot going on. So just kind of always coming from a place of empathy and curiosity and seeking to understand. But I think, like, to be honest, a big one is translations, because I've had family members say, well, like, it's not translated. I don't understand what they're saying anyways. And then also just like empathy that people are really busy and that just because they're not here doesn't mean they don't care. We have really, really big turnout for family community events like our multicultural night or all those sorts of things. And so I'm wondering, like, instead of requiring people to kind of necessarily come to something like this, and I know that like it's been talked about in the past and there have been efforts for like coffee talks and those sorts of things, which I know are appreciated, but showing up where the parents already are, whether that's like the sports games or like the theater performances. And I know I see some of you, but those sorts of things to make it just easier access for families. So those are my thoughts. But yeah, I've appreciated this discussion today. So thank you.
All right. There's another hand up. Anybody else?
Well, Courtney, it was mine. I just was thinking very similarly to what Stephanie said, to the T. The only other thing that I would have offered up additionally is that like frequency of meeting, right? Like a town hall like happening one time at the end of the year really then limits people's ability to show up if they could. Maybe today they were busy, but a month ago on this same day or same like time frame they could have been available. So yeah, but echoing, that's why I put my hand down. Everything Stephanie said.
Anyone else? We have about 6 minutes left. Just wanted to let everyone know.
I just want to say thank you for letting us know that for sure. Let me know that. Those are good things to be to take in and good feedback for sure for going forward.
And definitely I'll just add, and Carly can probably chime in, but when we did the coffee chats, we had mixed attendance as well. But we did have in one of them, we did have Spanish speaking families show up and talk with us about some things. And so that was really helpful. We had other ones where we had lots of people, that a nice, robust group of people, and other ones, but we learned lessons from that too. Like we just heard from families regarding timing and drop-offs and all of those things as well. So I think these are also lesson learned for me is right, making sure that we're not having so many activities from a district level at the same time where all the schools are having their activities, because that was a hard thing to do, because definitely after May 15th, there's a flurry of school-based activities and just thinking about, where are other opportunities and different opportunities during the year. So these are all good. This is all good information.
Yeah, I think just to highlight what you said, with the coffee chats and with this, so this is a part of our larger goal. One of our 3 board goals this year was to find more structured ways for the board to get feedback from the community. And so we started small with those coffee chats and with a town hall, with the intention that we would build in a stronger cadence. And I think, like with anything, there were 2, I think, of the coffee chats where it was literally just Dr. Pedroza and I just chatting, right? But we kept doing them. And just like with anything, with continuity and consistency, and building that into routine, like things will, I think, kind of fall into place, be more attended. And I think I just want to speak to as well, like, if there was any feeling that there was sort of anything but empathy, and any sort of tone of if people aren't here, it means that they don't care. That's certainly not what's in my heart and my intention, and I don't believe that of the board. And so I just wanted to make sure, like, if that is a narrative that feels like is coming from the board, please let us know, because it certainly is never something that we want to reiterate. We totally understand, and I certainly recognize, as a busy person that works a full-time job, that has a family, all those things, right? The so many different things. Sometimes I have a hard time even coming to our meetings. And so it's not about, our curiosity doesn't come from a lack of compassion or empathy, but more of just curiosity for how we can continue to improve, and really connect in a more meaningful way with folks. So just wanted to, please, again, let me know if you feel like that is not the vibe or the messaging that you are getting from us.
So I just wanted to pick up a little bit on the idea. I'm a big fan of going where people are already. So the parent advisory committee, the student advisory committee, PTA meetings, all of that stuff. We talked about going into classrooms, the civics classrooms, so we've done some of that. I mean, I'm a big fan of kind of probably doing more of that kind of stuff and working it into places where people are already collecting. And as far as some of the bigger events, what I've noticed over the years is the 3 magic things that work well for particularly families is if you have food, translation, and childcare, then you're going to get people to come. And if you, particularly if you can, then utilize the community liaisons to help different ethnic groups get together and talk about what they are concerned about, that has worked really well. I mean, we've done a little bit of that, but anyway, just the whole idea of I think is one I'm a big fan of, and that is kind of going out where people are already there and getting into those programs, and then talking about things. There's a lot of stuff that school boards talk about that's fairly esoteric, but bringing it down, bring it to, not down, but bring it to a level that, you know, parents and students and so forth can relate to, and, you know, directly into how they're experiencing the schools.
Well, folks, we have about just 1 final minute. So I just wanted to, if there's kind of any last thoughts, well, that minute just turned. But if there's any kind of last lingering thoughts from any member of the board or Dr. Pedrosa, any kind of final words you want to say, if there's a question that came up for anyone that's attending that you didn't get a chance to ask, please email us and we'll get back to you with that answer. And then of course you can always provide public comment at an upcoming meeting.
Yeah, I just want to thank everyone for being here. This is definitely giving me food for thought for future work, and thinking about how to support the board and the engagement. Some of them do it already, but how to refine this process a little bit more. So and I want to thank Director Simpson for, you know, pushing us to keep having this forum, and I think that and all of you, all the board members who continually engage with the community, and this is just one other way. So firm believer of multiple ways of seeing how we can get information. And I wish everyone a great summer. You all deserve it. Everyone deserves it to breathe. And we'll continue to see you through board meetings and such and into the next year. Thank you.
I just want to step up and I show gratitude for those that did attend tonight. It tells us that this trying to make ourselves available is something that's wanted. I agree with Dr. Pedrosa. We may want to refine it for, you know, greater availability to folks, but this is a step forward where we've had meetings where nobody came. So this is a really good step.
If there's no more final words, I'll end the meeting. And thank you so much, everybody.
We need a motion.
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
You move to adjourn?
I could get a motion to adjourn. Yeah, okay. A second.
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Good night, all.
Good night.